That plus his efforts to battle pesky robocalls, the changes he's proposing after the troubled M&T Bank conversion, and his fight to defend Connecticut's gun laws under attack. And the organization behind many of those laws, Connecticut Against Gun Violence, sharing the state of our state's response. What still needs to be done, newly proposed laws including taxation, and how community initiatives could be our greatest defense against the rise in gun violence and deaths. Well, good morning, and thanks for joining us on The Real Story. I'm Jen Bernstein. After more than 150 years, Stone Academy closed all 3 of its campuses in just a matter of days, a complete surprise to their students and to the state. The school, meant to ready healthcare professionals already in desperate demand here in Connecticut and nationwide, was shut down after an investigation found the educational experience and graduation rates were not up to standard. Since the school wouldn't pay for a professional audit, the Office of Higher Education was forced to close Stone Academy's doors.
I'm backward in my mortgage, in my car notes.
Yes.
How many times?
Yes.
Because I quit a full-time job to finish school. I only heard on the news that Stone was closed. Not till today, not even an email.
They never told us that our clinicals would not count. We took time away from our families, our children, work, everything. And now they're telling us we can't graduate.
And not notify us to tell us that they're closing and then continue to take students into the program. That's a scam.
Pretty upsetting. Connecticut's Attorney General, though, is now getting involved. AG William Tong saying, "We are going to throw everything we have at them," issuing a subpoena to access Stone Academy's records on tuition, marketing, revenue, and accreditation. And the Attorney General joins us right now to talk about that and more. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Jen.
All right, so let's get into it. I mean, this is incredibly upsetting to hear what these students have gone through, the money that they've put on the table to become a healthcare professional, a field that we need. We need nurses. We need what their skill set is in our state right now. So your office was alerted to this through people calling you and complaining, correct?
Yes, we heard from students. We heard from people that worked at Stone Academy. This is extremely hard for them and their families, but extremely hard for the state. I mean, we're still trying to claw our way out of a pandemic, and we need nurses more than ever. So it's just unconscionable to treat students this way. It's wrong, and we are going after them with everything we have.
So when you're hearing the experiences from the students and from the staff as well, what are the potential violations you're looking at here? What rings a bell and you say, that doesn't sit right?
So we're looking at everything and exercising all of our power and authority to hold Stone Academy, its administrators and owners accountable. But at the end of the day, students were told that they should borrow a lot of money. They should get federal student loans, private loans. They should spend their savings to pay tens of thousands of dollars up front in exchange for a quality nursing education. Right, that they would get qualified faculty, that they would get clinical programs that qualified them for their professional qualifications, and that they'd be ready to sit for the NCLEX or the exam, the professional boards, to become nurses. Now, it seems to us that much of that may not have been true. And so if it wasn't true and they were lied to, or if the school did not deliver on what they said they would deliver on and people are out tens of thousands of dollars, that's a real problem, and it could be illegal.
What are some of the law violations that if a place did that, they would be violating?
So these could be unfair and deceptive acts and practices. That's the technical language for basically a consumer protection violation. There could also be other violations in terms of public health statutes, professional licensing statutes, and then on top of that, if we find that there was any criminal misconduct, we'll refer that to the appropriate authorities.
Okay, yeah, it's important to note that this is civil right now,
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And
right now, my focus is exercising the state's civil authority.
Right, and then if you find anything, then you refer it. If there's anything that you all find that you believe could be criminal. Interesting. All right, so have you heard from Stone Academy yet?
Our office is in direct communication with them. We're trying to force them to do an audit so that we could figure out, where students are in terms of their credits, right? Who paid what money, where they are with their loans. We need to get all that information to make people whole.
Would you say that they're cooperating, or is there any kind of sense? I know obviously this is an open investigation, so there might not be stuff that you can say, but what's your feel from dealing with them?
I do think that they're cooperating at the moment with our investigation. And beyond that, I can't say more.
Okay. So Stone Academy is suggesting that students transfer their credits to 4 partner institutions. And the president, though, Joe Beerbaum, apparently has ties to 2 of them. Beerbaum, also the president of Payer College, I might be saying that wrong, which is at the University of Bridgeport, and his father-in-law apparently is the president of Goodwin University. Does this play into the investigation at all?
We're looking at everything. Obviously, there are a lot of rumors out there. I'm going to deal with facts.
Sure.
And we're going to focus on a comprehensive investigation. We're going to turn over every rock to make sure that we understand what happened here, who had a role in it. And if we find wrongdoing, we're going to hold them accountable.
How powerful can your office be with that? Like, what kind of powers do you have? You're trying to make them do an audit. You're trying to obviously talk with them. You say they're responsive right now, but what can your office do for these students? The Attorney
General's office and the state of Connecticut has broad authority to protect consumers and to protect these students and to take action, and we're going to do that.
Okay. All right. We are going to get to some other topics right here. We're going to do a little topic jumping because I know you've been very busy. So M&T Bank conversion, obviously it was pretty disastrous because a lot of people saw, some serious problems with their money. Your office actually received more than 400 complaints about the merger between People's United and M&T Bank. So you've been looking into that. That includes money disappearing, loss of access to online banking, and people having trouble accessing loved ones' bank accounts if they have power of attorney. I can imagine that was incredibly stressful for certain people. You, I was reading, weren't happy with the initial response from the bank. Is that correct?
Still not happy.
Explain that to me.
Yeah, basically, this started months ago, and I expressed my grave concern before the merger happened about their readiness and about the commitments that M&T made. And I said to them then, you better be ready for this, and you better uphold your end of the bargain. And then they merge, and you see this so-called conversion where M&T merges with People's and their computer systems, and there's a massive failure, right, across the system, and people can't get access to their money. Automatic bill pay, for example. I'm a family of the Tongs, rely on automatic bill pay like so many people do, and bills weren't getting paid, and people were incurring late fees, and they weren't getting, they couldn't close their mortgage transactions. And basically, we had failures across this system, and that's when the complaints started pouring in. To this moment, I've seen more than 400 complaints in my office. By the way, that's a lot. For any one incident, that's a lot. That's a lot. And those complaints, while the bank has been responsive in resolving a lot of complaints, there are still complaints that are unresolved, and it continues. And that's why I'm still frustrated.
Right. And 400 to your office. And just to give an example, Stone Academy, you said your office had 100 complaints. So 400 I could see being a lot. And those are the people who've taken the time to write to you and complain, right? Because there are other people who are just dealing with it or just taking the hit if they were late on bills.
There are a lot of people who have suffered through this process and frankly didn't have the time or the bandwidth to call and file a complaint and follow through because they have to go to work and make sure their kids are doing their homework and cook dinner for their family. They have to live and go on with their lives. They don't have time to dedicate to fighting with the bank.
So where do we go from here?
We're going to keep on them. And today, what we're focused on the Attorney General's office are the people that have submitted complaints and getting those resolved. But beyond that, we're asking for the legislature to give us even broader authority to go after institutions like M&T and to hold them accountable and to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, it would expand your investigative power. I was reading about. You feel like there's a regulatory gap there that needs to be closed. Okay, we only have 4 minutes left. I want to make sure we get to defending Connecticut's gun laws because obviously that's a big one. Hot political issue right now, of course.
Yeah.
And Connecticut Connecticut has some of the strongest gun laws in the nation. We know that. And we are finding ourselves in this very unique position where decisions on the federal level could be undercutting what we have here in our state. The recent one having to do with the domestic violence gun laws, which you've been pretty outspoken about. And just so everyone knows this background, a federal appeals court struck down a federal law that prohibits individuals with domestic violence restraining orders from possessing guns. So what does that mean for us in Connecticut?
So it's very personal for us in Connecticut, not just because of what happened in Newtown 10 years ago, but what happened to Lori Jackson, who was murdered by her estranged husband after she decided to leave him. And her husband actually shot her mom, Mary Jackson, who survived, and then murdered Lori while their 18-month-old twins were asleep upstairs.
Ugh.
And because of that, when I was in legislature, I wrote and passed Lori Jackson's law at Mary's urging, and I stood with her when we passed that law, and I stood with her again just a couple of weeks ago when the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, based in Texas, a federal court of appeals, overturned a federal version of Lori Jackson's law, a federal domestic violence gun law. And you know, most people, I think, agree that it makes no sense to let domestic abusers have guns, and it makes no sense to let domestic abusers keep their guns at the moment when the abused wife, spouse, girlfriend decides to leave that relationship. That's the most dangerous moment, right? When somebody is liable to get hurt or get shot or get killed. And so we wrote a statute here in Connecticut that says in those moments, in a really highly emotional and combustible domestic violence situation, you got to take guns out of the equation. And for the Fifth Circuit to say, no, we're not going to do that is ludicrous. It's lunacy, frankly.
So, you know, it's a little bit troubling in terms of if someone files a lawsuit here in our state, it could put Connecticut's laws in jeopardy, right? So has that happened yet?
So there's a challenge to our assault weapons ban here in Connecticut. I'm not aware of any challenge to the domestic violence gun law at this moment. Mm-hmm. Because of the Supreme Court's decision in a case called Bruin in this past term, a lot of gun rights activists from outside of Connecticut, I should add, think that they can come into Connecticut and frankly challenge Connecticut's sovereignty, right? Our own right to make our own decisions about how we're going to handle gun laws and gun violence and how we're going to protect citizens here in Connecticut. These people are coming from out of state to try to change Connecticut's laws, and we're not going to let them. I feel very, not just strong, but confident in the state's position. Our laws are eminently constitutional, and they without a doubt will stand up to constitutional scrutiny, and we're going to win these cases.
How much are we a target just because we have some of the strictest gun laws in the nation?
You know, in a really perverse way, we're a target because of our gun laws, and we're a target because of Newtown, and because of our experience with gun violence, the worst kind of experience you can have. For some reason, activists from out of state, they like to try to make an example of us in some crazy, perverse, contorted way. And that's why it's so important for the state, acting through the Attorney General, to stand up to them, to say that Connecticut has made these decisions, passed these laws to keep people safe. And because we did that, we are one of the safest states in the nation with respect to gun violence, and we want to keep it that way.
Attorney General William Tong, always good to have you on The Real Story. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jen.
All right, coming up on The Real Story, we are continuing the discussion about gun violence and gun laws. The executive director of Connecticut Against Gun Violence joins us to talk about the impact firearms have had and still have in our communities, plus what still needs to be done this legislative session and how local initiatives are making all the difference when it comes to prevention.